Hello, this is Dr. Nanda Prasad, Professor of Oral Pathology, Sri Rajiv Gandhi College of Dental Sciences and Hospital, Bangalore. So, we'll be dealing with something called disease of bone and joints. So, before I start off with this disease of bone and joints, I'll just tell you a little about what bone has a role to do. Your bone helps you move, gives you shape, and supports your body. They are living tissues that rebuild constantly throughout your life. During childhood and teens, your body adds new bone faster than it removes old bones. After about the age of 20 years, you can lose bone faster than you can make bones. This is what you need to know at this level and how it is going to help us in studying this chapter. So, bone diseases make bones easy to break. This is how we'll start this. Starting with the first disease, it's called as osteogenesis imperfecta. It's also called as brittle bone disease. It's a group of inherited disorders characterized by fragile bones that break easily. It's something to do with the procollagen alpha helix matrix being defective. Osteogenesis imperfecta is caused by a defective genes. These genes that affect how the body makes collagen. A protein that helps strengthen bone called as procollagen alpha helix is defective here. The term osteogenesis imperfecta means imperfect bone formation. There are at least 19 different types of osteogenesis imperfecta. What is important at our level, we are going to deal with it. So look at this picture. You see the magnified view of normal bone. You see the magnified view of normal bone and the one with. Just looking at the picture at the far end, you can see the x-rays of the leg. If you observe it keenly, you can see that bones are bent. This is the classical feature of osteogenesis imperfecta. The bones, strength of the bone is compromised. So, brittle bone disease, what is it all about? As you can see in the slides, I have just mentioned there are the different kinds of 4 types we are going to talk about, which are important to the dental students. So, what happens? What is the etiology? Etiology is there is an inborn error in collagen metabolism. Which is the collagen? The collagen is procollagen alpha helix. What happens? There is a mutation in the genes. The defect in cross-linking is collagen cross-linking is seen. So whenever that happens, the strength of the bone is compromised. So the clinical features, what are the clinical features you see? One is hypermobility of joints. You might ask me why there is hypermobility. If the collagen is weaker than it should be in the tissues, I'll come again. If the collagen is weaker than it should be, the tissues in the bone will be fragile, which can make the ligaments and joint loose and stretchy and lead to hypermobility of joints. Pulmonary infection is one more clinical feature. What exactly causes this? The primary collagen defect affects lung tissues in all people with osteogenesis imperfecta. Altered lung tissue predisposes the patients to have repetitive infection. In most cases will be, you can see lots of pulmonary infections in these cases. There is hearing loss. Why there is hearing loss? Since it's a collagen disorder, 50 to 90% of osteogenesis imperfecta patients present with hearing loss, seen mostly in the second to third decades of life. So you see blindness. Why do you see blindness? That presents in the form of there is something wrong with the cornea. Then there is glaucoma, there is retinal detachment and optic neuropathy that leads to blindness. Bruisability, because the blood vessels get fragile, or what you call as vascular fragility. Then bone fragility. Why is the bone fragile? As we know, that is due to the inborn collagen matrix defect. Then you have blue sclera. Why do you get blue sclera? The blue-gray color of the sclera is due to the underlying choroidal veins, which show through. This is due to the sclera being thinner than normal. When the sclera is thinner than normal, the underlying choroidal veins are seen, and that is what you see as a blue sclera. Going on to the type 1, you have pathologic features. As I said, there is skeletal deformity and dentinogenesis imperfecta. So what happens in this kind? The teeth is discolored, it's blue gray colored, sometimes yellowish brown. It gives an sort of an opalescent sheen. The roots are short, the pulp chambers are missing. Now the second one, type 2, it's a most severe form called as a lethal kind of osteogenesis imperfecta. So what do you see in this lethal kind of osteogenesis imperfecta? You see multiple rib and long bone fractures at birth, marked deformities, then you see long bones, skull defect, and a dark blue sclera. Most of the births in these cases are stillborn. So what do you see in the dental part of it? You see atubular dentin, you see absence of predentin, you see lots of abundance of agrellophilic fibers in the coronal pulp. So there is something called as the type 3. The type, before I tell you to concentrate on these pictures, let me finish it, the type 3 and the type 4. The type 3, you see dentinogenesis imperfecta type 1. It's the regular dentinogenesis imperfecta. In the type 4, you have the dentinogenesis imperfecta type 2, where you see rare and the severe form affects tooth development. It's weak and discolored tooth, affects both primary and secondary tooth. But in case of dentinogenesis imperfecta type 1, it affects only the permanent tooth. You look at this picture, as I mentioned before, you can see the yellowish teeth, you can see the opalescent sheen there, and in most of these cases the pulp chamber is missing. If you can observe in all these diagrams, especially these pictures, and one OPG. And treatment, there is no specific treatment as such. The problem most of the times might decrease at puberty. Histopathology, it's understood whatever I have said in the clinical side, it manifests here in the histopathological portions. You could see, because of all those, you could see lots of cortex, thin cortex, immature spongy bone, the trabeculae is delicate, the osteopular activity is imperfect and retarded, there is thickness of long bones, so on and so forth. Whatever has seen in clinical is manifested in the histopathological portion. So differential diagnosis would be something which would initially, when you come across a case, you might think of directly, you would not be thinking in terms of osteogenesis imperfecta. You would think this could be the possible things. On future investigations, you come to know this is osteogenesis imperfecta. What are those other diseases you might mistake this to be? Osteopetrosis, fetal rickets, Marfan syndrome, and normal infants. Next, going on to cleidocranial dysplasia. Cleidocranial dysplasia, also called as Mary-Santon syndrome. It's a condition that primarily affects development of the bones and teeth. Some people with cleidocranial dysplasia have extra pieces of bone called as Wormian bones within the sutures. What is the defect? The defect is in the RUNX2 gene, which is involved in the bone formation. So what exactly happens here? As you say, there is intramembranous and endochondral bone in the skull is affected. It affects bone derived from both intramembranous as well as there is a problem in endochondral ossification. There is transverse enlargement of the calvarium. You can see delayed closure of the fontanelles. Fontanelles close very late. So there is deficiency of the clavicle. Why is it so? The clavicles are seen to be missing or partially missing. In 80% of the time, the defect is bilateral. Then you see lack of cellular cementum. Cementum, that is cementum formation, is deficient. So you can see these pictures. Just look at these pictures. What has happened to the this particular person. Look at the collarbone in the normal case, and in this case it's partially missing. The normal collarbone, it's a continuous process, you can see, as they mentioned in the diagram. Here it is partially missing. When this happens, I can see from the far end picture of this individual, you can see he can move his clavicle in a bizarre manner. So, clinical features. What are the clinical features? The person is usually short statured. He has short fingers, tapered fingers, the slender shoulder blades. There is scoliosis. Hypermobility of shoulders. Why there is hypermobility of shoulders? Because the collarbone, or also called as the clavicles, is absent or underdeveloped. As a result of this, you have the shoulders being narrow and sloping and can be brought unusually close to each other. You have a brachycephalic head. What do you mean by brachycephalic? It means wide, short skull. Then you have frontal parietal occipital bossing, that is prominence you see on the face. You see maxillary hypoplasia, that is the maxilla is not formed to the optimum levels. Mandibular prognathism, because the mandible appears much bigger than it actually is because the maxilla is underdeveloped. You have a high arched palate. So there is prolonged exfoliation of teeth, the multiple unerupted teeth, lots and lots of supernumerary teeth. Whenever there is lots of supernumerary teeth, unerupted teeth, it leads to malocclusion. When you take an X-ray, you see patent fontanelles. That means the fontanelles are not closed. There is malpositioned teeth because of the previous things I have mentioned. So treatment would be general. One would be a genetic counseling, protective headgear to protect the patent fontanelles because the fontanelles are open. Surgical involvement is seen to help for some people. Orthodontic treatment for the aesthetic effect. Going on to the next one, Clausen's syndrome. It's also called as craniofacial dysostosis, also called branchial arch syndrome. There was a person called Octave Clausen who worked on this syndrome and explained it in detail. That's why it was named after him. So what do you see in this? What exactly this is all about? It's a genetic disorder characterized by the premature fusion of certain skull bones. That is what you mean by craniosynostosis. This early fusion prevents the skull from growing normally and affects the shape of the face. Affects around 1.6 in 1 lakh people. So this syndrome affects the first branchial arch. The first branchial arch is also called as the pharyngeal arch, as you know, which is the precursor of maxilla and mandible. The developing fetus skull and the facial bones fuse early, thus there is no future scope for expansion. So when all this happens, there is exophthalmosis. What is this? There is bulging of the eyes due to shallow eye sockets after early fusion of bone. Because there is early fusion of bone, the sockets, the eyeball appears to be bulging. There is hypertelorism, greater than normal distance between the eyes. Then you have hypoplastic maxilla, insufficient growth of the midface. You have mandibular prognathism. Most symptoms are secondary to the abnormal skull structures. These pictures give you the exact picture of what I just spoke about. You can look at all these pictures. All the clinical features, what I have spoken about, is present here. Next is Treacher's-Collins syndrome, also called as mandibulofacial dysostosis. It's also called as mandibulofacial dysostosis. It's an inherited condition in which some bones and tissues in the face are not developed. It usually affects the cheekbones, jaw, chin, ears. It's caused by a change in a gene on chromosome 5, which affects facial development. Common symptoms of Treacher-Collins syndrome is the underdevelopment of the lower jaw. Underdevelopment of the zygomatic bones, it gives the the sunken appearance, the tongue is retracted, the small mandible leads to poor occlusion, severe cases difficulty in swallowing and breathing seen. The external ear, if you observe, is usually malformed. The cleft palate is common, sometimes seen with the whole of the palate at birth. Dental enamel is seen in 60% of the cases. A malocclusion is obviously seen when there is problem with the maxilla and the mandible here. The colobomas, what do you see? What do you mean by this colobomas of the lower eyelid? What is this colobomas? They are abnormalities seen at birth where they see missing patches of tissues in a structure that forms the eye. Look at this picture. This picture more or less describes whatever I have explained beforehand. Next, going on to Pierre-Robin syndrome. What is this Pierre-Robin syndrome? It is characterized by facial abnormalities. It's not merely a syndrome, but rather a sequence, a series of specific developmental malformations which can be attributed usually to a single cause. What possibly causes it? One is intrauterine growth of certain facial structures are restricted due to mechanical issues in gestation, or possibly due to mutation at chromosome 2 levels. What are the things you see here? You see micrognothia, that is unusually small mandible. You see glossoptosis. Tongue falls back into the throat due to the posterior displacement of the tongue and leads to airway obstruction. You see high arched or cleft palate. Failure of the right and left palatal shelves to fuse due to the position of the tongue. The patient has tall, slender stature, long leg, arms, hands and fingers seen. The face is usually a long, narrow face. As I mentioned before, you have a high arched palate. This is a descriptive picture of the explanation which has been done so far. What is this fibrous dysplasia? It is one of the most prominent fibro-osseous lesion. The limit of the class prevents me from explaining all the other fibro-osseous lesions. So I will just take the fibrous dysplasia, which is more important for the third year's BDS class. So what is it? It is a non-neoplastic hamartomatous lesion. It is never hereditary. It's an uncommon bone disorder in which scar-like tissue develops in place of normal bone. This irregular tissue can weaken the affected bone and cause it to deform or fracture. So what does it result from? It results from a post-zygotic activated mutation of the GNAS locus, which codes for G-coupled protein receptors. So what exactly happens here? The medullary bone is replaced by the abnormal fibrous connective tissue. It's a mosaic disease that can involve any part or combination of the craniofacial, maxillary or appendicular skeleton. Bone pain is a common complication of fibrous dysplasia. Now the question arises, why does this happen? There are many hypotheses, not theories, but hypotheses. The first hypothesis says that this is the hypothesis of the etiopathogenesis of fibrous dysplasia. The first one talks about deranged mesenchymal cell activity. It says that something is wrong with the mesenchymal cell activity which leads to this abnormality. The second one talks about defect in the control of the bone cell activity. It says that it is pointing towards the direction of the bone cell activity being impaired or something wrong in the entire mechanism. The third one, arrest in maturation at the oven bone stage. The maturation of the oven bone stage does not take place. This is what one more hypothesis tells us about. Another one talks about abnormal reaction of bone to trauma. And there is also a theory or a hypothesis which is talking about an endocrinal difference. Now, so let's make it limited. Let's not talk too much about fibroosseous lesions in particular, only about fibrous dysplasia. There are two kinds, as we know. One is the monostotic, and the second one is the polyostotic. Monostotic, as the name suggests, a single bone is affected. Polyostotic, multiple bones are affected. 25 to 30% of the fibrous dysplasia are of polystotic type. The other 75% obviously would be the monostotic type. The most common inference got out of this is that monostotic is more common. So what do you do is see in monostotic fibrous dysplasia? It involves a single bones, example ribs and femur. 80% of all the fibrous dysplasia is monostotic fibrous dysplasia. Jaw involvement is common in this disease, occurs more in the maxilla. In mandible, if it occurs in the body of the mandible. So this is about monostotic fibrous dysplasia. So what is this polystotic fibrous dysplasia? Here, as the name suggests, multiple bones are involved. There is skin pigmentation. There's cutaneous melanotic pigmentation is seen. And you see endocrine disorders, you see precocious puberty, you see acromegaly, hyperthyroidism and hyperprolactemia. So the clinical features is incomplete if I don't talk about two syndromes. The two syndromes are McCune-Albright syndrome and Jaffe-Lichtenstein syndrome. So what do you see in McCune-Albright syndrome? You see that it comprises polystotic fibrous dysplasia. You can see skin pigmentation in the form of café-alloy appearance. Café-alloy means coffee in milk appearance. Then you will see endocrine disturbance. What do you see? You see sexual precocity. Usually it is seen in females. In Jaffe-Lichtenstein, you will see multiple bone lesions and skin pigmentation, but you will never see anything involved with endocrine disturbances. So let me just show you a slide where I just mentioned about what you see in what I already explained before, monostotic fibrous dysplasia. As you know, it is craniofacial fibrous dysplasia. As I told before, maxilla is favored in the mandible. It's asymptomatic, slow enlargement, and obviously because of all these disturbances there will be malocclusion. So radiographically, what do you see here? Radiographically we see the presence of ground glass appearance. What is this ground glass appearance? Why do you see ground glass appearance, or why do you see orange peel appearance? The reason you see is it is due to superimposition of poorly calcified bone trabeculae arranged in a disorganized pattern. Because of this, you see the ground glass, orange peel, or the multilocular or the unilocular radiolucencies. Histopathology is pretty obvious. You see lots of connective tissue which is cellular in nature. The bony trabeculae takes a classical Chinese letter pattern. Sometimes the aneurysmal bone cyst may be associated with fibrous dysplasia. So what runs very close to differential diagnosis to this is ossifying fibroma, Paget's disease and chronic osteomyelitis. But among all these three, I think ossifying fibroma is one which runs very close to fibrous dysplasia histopathologically. That's the reason I just put the next slide up. So how do you differentiate it clinically and histopathologically? How does ossifying fibroma look? How does fibrous dysplasia look if you present a case? So usually ossifying fibroma is seen in 3rd to 4th decades of life. Fibrous dysplasia is seen in the 1st or the 2nd decade of life. Ossifying fibroma, females are favored more. Fibrous dysplasia, equal sex predilection is seen. And ossifying fibroma, you see the body of the mandible is favored, while in the case of fibrous dysplasia, you see more of maxillary cases being presented. Ossifying fibroma, you see well-defined margins of the trabeculae. In fibrous dysplasia, you see poorly defined. Going on to one more interesting lesion. It's called as cherubism. What is this cherubism? There was a worker in 1933 by the name of Jones. He called it a familial multilocular cystic disease of the jaws. But later in 1938, they renamed it as cherubism. They said it's an hereditary autosomal dominant uh, lesion, but as a result of weaker penetrance of the trait in females, the phenotype is approximately twice as common in males. So what exactly is this cherubism? It's a rare genetic disorder that causes prominence in the lower portion of the face. The name is derived from the temporary chubby cheek resemblance to the cherubs or the potus as they were actually called in old Renaissance paintings. In the old classical Renaissance paintings, you see these cherubs. So the cherubs who were seen in those paintings resembled the patient suffering from cherubism. So what happens here? The onset is typically between the ages of 6 months to 7 years, but rarely is delayed until late teenage or after puberty. Typically, symmetrical swellings are noticed at the age of 2 to 4 years in the regions of the angles of the mandible and in severe cases in the maxilla. The symmetrical mandibular swelling gives the face as excessively chubby appearance. The alveolar ridges are expanded and the mandibular swellings may sometimes be so gross lingually as to interfere with speech, swallowing, or even breathing in some cases, but the rapidity of the progress is variable. Teeth are frequently displaced and may be loosened. Maxillary involvement is usually associated with widespread mandibular disease and is uncommon. Extensive maxillary lesion causes the eyes to appear to be turned heavenward. This, together with the plumpiness of the face, is the reason for this patient being likened to the cherubs. So, what do you see here? Despite the lack of inflammation, there is frequently cervical lymphadenopathy due to reactive hyperplasia and fibrosis. This is typically seen in the early stages and may be completely subsided by puberty. So these are some of the features. The maxillary involvement is shown by diffuse rarefaction of the bone, but the spread of the lesion can cause opacity of the sinuses. This is what I am talking about in the radiological part. There is expansion and thinning of the cortical plates as well, and there is teeth floating in cystic appearances also observed. Laboratory diagnosis, there is no increase in alkaline phosphatase seen. Going on to osteitis deferens, also called as Paget's disease of bone. So the etiology points towards a genetic factor, but possibly in some cases some intranuclear inclusions compatible with paramyxo or other virus have also been demonstrated both in osteoblasts and osteoclasts. So they're not very sure about the etiology, and more so they're favoring the genetic aspect. So clinically seen more in the middle age. The males it's seen more than the females. So what are the things? What are the possible bones which are involved in this? The sacrum is involved, the spine is involved, the skull is involved, the femoral bone is involved, the pelvis is involved. What happens here? There is cellular remodeling and deformity of one or bone more. The affected bones show signs of dysregulated bone remodeling when you observe it under the microscope. When the bone pathology involves the area where the nerve passes through the bone, it causes the compression of the nerve, causing pain. So that explains the chronic bone pain the patient faces. So patient also faces a lot of headache because as the head bones are frequently involved, it causes headache and deafness. The deafness possibly is due to the auditory foramen narrowing down as there is resultant compression of the nerves in the inner ear. And you see patients suffering from blindness too. Likewise, you could explain that the blindness possibly is due to compression of the nerves supplying the eyes, leading to loss of vision. The same way you can explain the facial paralysis and dizziness as well, and enlargement of the skull. The weakening of the bone causes the short stature and the waddling gait. So when it involves the jaws, when the jaws are affected, the alveolar process becomes symmetrical and grossly enlarged. There also may be gross and irregular hypercementosis of teeth, which may become fused to the sclerotic areas of the bone. Attempts to extract affected teeth may succeed only by tearing away large masses of bone. Severe bleeding or osteomyelitis or ischemia of bone may follow. So there is some dramatic changes. There is spacing between the teeth, and some patients come back with the tightness of the dentures. It is because the bone keeps growing haphazardly. That's the reason these changes you will see. So if we like to explain this, how actually it happens, there are three phases you can explain it in. The first phase is called as the bone resorptive phase, also called as the lytic phase. What happens in this bone resorptive phase? The normal bone is resorbed by the osteoclast, and that are what resorts? I'll come back again. The normal bone is resorbed by the osteoclasts, which are present in very large numbers. Then the normal osteoclast. The bone turnover during this stage is measured to be more than 20 times the natural turnover times. Okay, the second one is the vascular phase or the mixed phase. What happens in this vascular phase or the mixed phase? There is increase in bone formation from numerous osteoblasts. The newly made bone is abnormal with collagen fibers arranged very haphazardly rather than linearly as with normal bone. So the next stage is the oppositional or the sclerosing phase. Here bone formation dominates, and the bone that is formed has a disorganized pattern and is weaker than normal adult bone. This woven bone pattern allows the bone marrow to be infiltrated by excessive fibrous connective tissue and blood vessels, leading to hypervascular bony state. So what gives this? When you take an X-ray, when in radiological point of view, when you is explained, how does it look like? You have this classical appearance of cotton wool appearance. Cotton wool appearance is a classical radiological appearance of Paget's disease of bone. Why do you get this cotton wool appearance? It is caused due to the thickened disorganized trabeculae, which leads to areas of sclerosis in previously loosened areas of bone, giving it a fluffy appearance or a cotton wool appearance. Then obviously you can see lots of hypercementosis radiologically. So with so many bone changes happening, there is loss of lamina dura, there is obliteration of the PDL space. Histopathologically, the bone appears in a mosaic pattern with a thickened line that demarcates randomly oriented lamellar bone. The exaggerated trabeculae and disorganized cortices result in a lack of ability to resist deformation and greatly increased vulnerability to fractures. What I would like to say is, you would see a large number of osteoclasts. You see a mosaic pattern, which is a classical appearance in Paget's disease, and numerous reversal lines. Lots and lots of reversal lines. So laboratory diagnosis. So there is increase in serum alkaline phosphatase and increase in urinary calcium. You would ask me, why is there an increase in serum alkaline phosphatase and urinary calcium? Because of increased osteoblastic activity and bone formation, you see serum alkaline phosphatase and urinary calcium to be higher. So there is increase of urinary hydroxyproline. So why is it so? Hydroxyproline, if you can recall, is a product of collagen breakdown. Approximately 20 to 30% of the total hydroxyproline are from bone resorption. That explains why urinary hydroxyproline is high. So differential diagnosis, it runs very closely to acromegaly, florid osseous dysplasia, sclerosing osteomyelitis, osteosarcoma and acquired osteopetrosis. Treatment, no specific treatments as such. You will put the patient for analgesics so that the pain comes down. People suggested calcitonin. What are the other complications? Because the strength of the bone is affected, there is skeletal deformity, there is weakened bones, neurological deficits, as I've explained before in clinical features, why all this happens. And around 1 to 15% of Paget's disease, there are chances of converting into osteosarcomas. Thank you.